Welcome to Pursuing Quality Long-Term Care, an educational podcast for individuals needing long-term care and their families. Join us as we talk with national experts and advocates about strategies you can use in the pursuit of quality long-term care. In this episode, we are sharing the audio from Consumer Voice's webinar that was part of the Dignity for All Staffing Standards Now campaign. This campaign is advocating for a minimum staffing standard in nursing homes. This discussion highlighted how there is little accountability for how nursing homes spend taxpayer dollars, despite receiving tens of billions of dollars each year in Medicare and Medicaid dollars. In this episode, you will hear Consumer Voice's Policy Director Sam Brooks and attorney Ernie Tosh discuss the new report, Where Do the Billions of Dollars Go? A look at nursing home related party transactions. The report takes an in-depth look at how nursing home owners and operators funnel billions of dollars through companies they own with little to no accountability for how that money is used each year. Sam and Ernie also offer examples and solutions to address this industry-wide problem to ensure public dollars are going toward resident care. To view the PowerPoint slides mentioned in this episode and to learn more about the campaign, visit theconsumervoice.org/pursuingquality.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Consumer Voice's Dignity for All continuing campaign, which we are putting on in support of a national minimum staffing standard for nursing home residents. My name is Sam Brooks, and I am the Director of Public Policy for the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. For those of you who don't know, Consumer Voice is the leading national voice. We represent consumers and issues related to long-term care. We advocate for public policies that support quality of care and quality of life responsive to consumers' needs in all long-term care settings. We aim to empower and educate consumers and families with the knowledge and tools they need to advocate for themselves, train and support individuals and groups that empower and advocate for consumers of long-term care, and we promote the critical role of direct care workers and best practices in the quality care delivery. Please go to our Dignity for All webpage. This is, again, our campaign. As many of you know, CMS, Centers for Medicare, essentially President Biden announced that they would be implementing a minimum staffing standard for nursing home residents, which advocates, families, residents themselves have called for decades. They promised it about this time. Last year, they said it should be out in a year, but we learned yesterday that it's being delayed. Hopefully that's not bad news, but now they're promising it sometime in spring. For the past 3 months, we have been conducting a campaign, again, called Dignity for All, trying to center the discussion of staffing standards, not on nursing homes themselves, but on residents and workers. We have featured the voices of residents speaking about what it's like to live in a facility when it's short-staffed, when there's inadequate staff to take care of them, when they have to sit for hours in their own waste because there isn't a CNA to change, to help them change, or even to get out of bed. And we also heard from workers who have been committed to this job for 20 or 30 years, but who have colleagues that were using their own food stamps to buy snacks for diabetic residents. And you can go to our website and hear those, view those webinars. So we've been trying to elevate the voice. The industry, both for-profit and nonprofit, are out in extreme opposition to a staffing standard, and they're focusing it on the nursing facility, but not the residents inside. And that's what we're concerned about. And that's what this campaign has been about. Today, we're getting a little more nerdy, a little more in the weeds. We're going to be talking about finances. And we're very fortunate today to be joined by a good friend to Consumer Voice and an extremely good friend to nursing home residents, Ernie Tosh, who is the founding attorney of Bedsore Law and the Tosh Law Firm. Many of you already know Ernie. He has become a living legend in the advocacy for nursing home residents, and we're really grateful to have him here today. And again, I've already introduced myself. So let's get right into it. The catalyst for this webinar was a report that we issued about a week ago called Where Do the Billions of Dollars Go? A Look at Nursing Home Related Party Transactions. And for some, a related party transactions is a term that they're quite familiar with when it comes to nursing homes. For others, they don't know what that means. Nevertheless, it's something that advocates have said hampers the quality of care in nursing home residents by diverting money away from care and potentially into the pockets of nursing home owners and operators. So today we're going to go through this report, explain to you what related parties are. We're going to show you where they're reported to the federal government. We're going to show you how there's little to no scrutiny at all on how this money is spent. But most importantly, we're going to offer you some concrete solutions. I mean, it is not a heavy lift to address this. So before I turn it over to Ernie, I just want to talk a little bit about the findings from our report, and we'll put these in context in the next few slides. But our primary finding was that despite billions of dollars being funneled through related party companies each year, there appears to be little to no scrutiny by the federal government on how this money is spent. In 2015, $11 billion was funneled through related party companies, and that's taxpayer dollars, that's Medicare and Medicaid dollars. 70% of nursing homes, at least 70% of nursing homes use related parties, both for-profit and non-profit nursing homes use these related parties. Nursing home owners and operators routinely, excuse me, I blocked my own thing, routinely pay their related parties more than the reported costs. And we'll illustrate that in the coming slides so you understand just what that means. Related parties make nursing homes look less profitable, while a closer look reveals that profits may be hidden in these transactions. What that means is related parties show up as expenses. Payments that these nursing homes make to their owners show up as expenses when they in fact could be profits. But what that allows them to do is say, we don't have money. Medicaid is not enough. You got to give us more money. We can't provide sufficient care because there's no money. And that is orchestrated that way. And we'll show you just how they do it. And cost reports do not capture enough information for CMS to fulfill its regulatory obligation of ensuring taxpayer dollars are spent on care. And that sounds kind of nerdy, but what we're saying is CMS just doesn't tell it. First of all, it doesn't look at a lot of this information, but it doesn't collect enough information. And we're going to go through now and talk about why that's so important. So I'm going to bring in Ernie. Ernie let me just introduce you for a second, Ernie. Ernie, we became aware of Ernie a couple of years ago during a congressional hearing. He was testifying during the pandemic, particularly on private equity, but talking about the finances. And we said, we have to get to know Ernie. We need to know who Ernie is. So we reached out to him, and we've collaborated on a variety of things over the years. And one of the things that brought us, I think, to this report was during the pandemic, the state of New York passed a law requiring a certain amount of money from each Medicaid dollar to go towards resident care. Meaning 70% had to go to care and 40% of that had to go to direct care. And the nursing home industry, the for-profit industry, filed this really great law, great for us, that pled that if under this law, they would have to return $900 million in profit to the state. And I said, hey, we should look at the numbers that they're pleading in these in this lawsuit and compare it to the numbers that they're reporting to the federal government. So I contacted Ernie. I said, Ernie, pull the cost reports for these homes and let's see if the numbers match up. And of course they didn't. Sometimes there was wild discrepancies, but it was clear that the information they were reporting to CMS was much different than the information they were pleading in their case. But what got me to the related parties was Ernie said, well, look at this column. And I looked over and there was this extremely wild numbers being reported by these facilities for related parties. And I said, this is the real story. So that's how we came to know Ernie. We've become really close allies, and we really appreciate all his efforts. Ernie, I want to turn it over to you now. Thanks.
Thanks, man. So first off, Sam did not introduce me correctly. He sent me an email this morning asking me, hey, how do you want to be introduced? And I told him, I want to be introduced as the wee baby Seamus. He wouldn't do it. So anyway, nursing home finances, that sounds really nerdy. I agree with Sam. When I got into working on this stuff, it was pretty nerdy, but I love data. And as such, I was drawn to the cost reports and then the stories that the cost reports actually tell us. And so I want to talk about how most nursing home chains are structured. In this slide, you can see you have nursing home 1 and nursing home 2, which would be, of course, visible to the public. And then behind them, you've got a real estate holding company, you've got a management company, you could have a therapy company, you could have a pharmacy, and all of those companies are owned by a single owner. So on this slide, Tosh Senior Care is the parent company of all the companies below it. It owns all of them. And as such, all of those companies below the parent are called sibling companies, or if you do business with each other, you're related parties. Those transactions are called related party transactions. Now, there's a formal definition within the CMS guidelines that talks about common ownership or control. In the thousands and thousands of nursing home cost reports that I've looked at, I've never seen a related party identified through control, meaning that instead of the parent company owning all the companies, it somehow controls one of the related parties. I've not ever seen that. It's always been common ownership. The parent company owns the therapy company, and the therapy company provides services to the nursing home. So we're going to talk about how this structure manipulates the cost reports and changes the public statements and public perception of the nursing home industry. So where is this information reported? Okay, related party transactions, like Sam talked about, are reported on the annual cost report that CMS requires each nursing home to submit each year. It is formally called CMS Form 2540-10. And like I said, every nursing home in the country that receives Medicare or Medicaid money must file this cost report. And it is filed with a certification on the front page that says this information is true and accurate, and it is signed by somebody usually very high up in the company, the president, the CFO, the CEO. It is not signed by the facility administrator. It is somebody much higher in the chain. This is what a related party transaction sheet looks like. This is from CMS Form 2540-10. It is worksheet number A81. If you look up here in the upper right-hand corner, that's where it's identified. And basically what it's laying out here is what expense category does this transaction relate to? We can see that the first one is what's called capital related costs, buildings and fixtures. Basically, that's rent. We can see that it's the facility lease. We can see in column 4, this is where they identify what is the underlying cost of making this building available to the nursing home. So the leasing company is saying it costs us $364,540 to make this building available for lease to the nursing home. Then in column 5, we see the nursing home is paying the leasing company $522,000 in rent. So in column 6, like it says up here, the math is just column 4 minus column 5. This is a $157,000 overpayment to the leasing company. So what that does is it's allowing the leasing company to have a profit on their books, and the $522,000 is an expense to the nursing home. So,
and Ernie,
yes.
who owns the leasing company?
Well, the leasing company, if it is on A81, is going to be owned by the parent company that owns the nursing home. These are related sibling companies. And what we see here is that, there's 9 transactions that are shown here. This information, there's actually more information than this. At first, we couldn't figure out how come this bottom number here of these columns, the totals, did not add up. If you add up this column, it does not equal $2.5 million. What we found in the data, because I have CMS's database, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, but I have their database. And so we went into the database and looked and found that they were actually collecting up to 24 transactions. It's just that their software and their template was only displaying 9 of them, and then it would total them up. So we were able to expand and see all the related party transactions up through 24 and figure out what these totals were for. Now, on this page, what we can see is this particular facility, which is a Pruitt facility, they overpaid the related parties by $449,000, which means that $449,000 of profit was realized by the related parties. And this facility showed a $2.99 million expense on their income statement. And I'll show you in a second how that works. But I just wanted to give you the background of where the data is and what is collected by CMS. I will also tell you, CMS doesn't audit this. CMS never looks at this. And the way I know that CMS never looks at this is because I've seen cost reports that were filed that only had the provider name, number, and the year that it was for. It was signed by a high-ranking official as being accurate, and there was nothing else displayed in the entire cost report. And that had been sitting in CMS's database for years. So I know they're not auditing this stuff. So with that, Sam, I thank you.
Oh yeah, so thanks, Ernie. So back to this sheet here. What really shocked us is, to make clear to folks, all of these payments are nursing facilities, are facilities making payments to owners that own the nursing facility. So this is all self-dealing. These amounts in this column here, this 2.5 million, this cost was to companies owned by the same people who own the nursing home. And then these payments were paid. And that's what a related party transaction is. It's when you're doing business with your own nursing home and charging its funds. So these crazy numbers that we found made me really want to look at this issue in a broader sense. So I pulled some numbers from our report just to show you what the numbers look like. So for instance, we ran some from Pruitt Health, who owns nursing homes, a variety of nursing homes in the South. And these are the numbers for Pruitt Healthcare, which are pretty shocking. So we looked at the cost reports from 2018 to 2020, and Ernie was able to aggregate, to put all the costs from each nursing home in that chain into one sheet, into one database. And so if you look here, in that year, in the 3-year period, Pruitt reported costs to related parties of about $480 million, but paid those related parties $570 million, which is an excess payment of 18%. And remember, these are all payments these are all Medicare and Medicaid dollars being paid to companies that the nursing home owner owns and operates. Just to illustrate some of what these costs are, home office costs are very, very common. You know, the idea that the home office offers some kind of management, what that is not clear. But they're one of the most common, next to rent and lease, costs are one of the most common related party expense. So for those 3 years, Pruitt reported $69.6 million in home office costs. It cost them $69 million to provide whatever service it was to that nursing home, but to their nursing homes. But yet they paid them $124 million almost. That's a 78% excess payment. And what's important here, at the same time, care in Pruitt facilities is not good. CMS's 5-star rating system, which isn't perfect, we know, but is really one of the only real gauges out there, shows that overall, Pruitt homes out of 5 stars really perform poorly. 2.82, 2.82 overall 5-star ratings, 2.63 on health inspection ratings, and 2.62 on staffing ratings. And overall, we looked at the staffing data for that period of time. And they on average, residents in Pruitt homes only receive 3.3 hours per resident day of direct care, which is 40 minutes less than a well-accepted standard of 4.1 hours per resident day. So it's not hard to connect this with, this by saying that the payments with the staffing. And just to illustrate more, we'll go on next. We also focused on life care centers, and their numbers are even more extraordinary. For the 3-year period of from 2018 to 2020, these are the numbers for life care centers, total related party payments. $1.1 billion in costs reported, $1.25 billion in payments. That's $140 million in excess payments, or 12.5% excess payment to them. For them, lease payments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a nursing home, then I'm going to sell it to a company I own, and I'm going to charge it rent. And if you look here, that was very lucrative for related parties. $64 million in costs to provide those facilities. So they reported it cost them $64 million to provide those facilities to life care, while at the same time, they paid them $92 million. That's a 44% almost excess payment. Same thing for home office costs. These are even, one year they reported 12.2 million and paid 23 million. And that's a 90% excess payment. So what this led us to believe is nobody can be looking at this because this is intolerable. Where is this money going? And it's intolerable to think that this is all sitting there and no one is looking at it. So that's putting our report in context. Ernie, let's talk. I'm going to turn it back to you to talk about where this data comes from and talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So I was looking in the Q&A and chat channel while Sam was talking. Yes, this data is publicly available. You get this through a Freedom of Information Act request or what we call a FOIA request to CMS. It basically looks like this. This is one that I sent out for a facility recently because I wanted the hard copy because as I mentioned earlier, I have CMS's database. The way you get CMS's database is there is a link on CMS's website that allows you to download the entire cost report database. Problem is, it is humongous, as you can imagine, because it has every cost report that's ever been filed in the history of cost reports, which dates back to 1994. So 16,000 cost reports per year, all the way back to 1994. Cannot be opened with any regular software. Just, it's way too large. So what you have to do is you have to get the data scheme for CMS's database, and you have to build an Oracle or Microsoft SQL database and import that giant file into a database, and then you can have access and use it. So that's what I did. And then we update it every 90 days. When CMS updates their database, we go in right behind them and we update ours. So ours mirrors them at all times.
So Ernie, really quick, how much would someone need to probably be ready to be invest to create a system that can access these cost reports that are supposed to be public?
Probably in time and money, we probably invested $100,000 to do that. But the alternative is sending a FOIA request for every cost report you would need to do any type of analysis. And if you're doing large scale analysis like we do, and it just becomes way too cumbersome. And that's why we went ahead and went to the expense of building the database so that we could do large scale research without having to do this ridiculous system of going to CMS for every single cost report. But they are publicly available. But here's the deal. Their template on related parties may not show all the related party transactions. That's where having a database revealed to us that there was more data behind shown in the template. So from there, we talk about, the payments are too high. It was $350,000 in cost to make that building available to the nursing home, and the nursing home paid $522,000 for it. Why did they do that, and why is that unreasonable? Well, CMS, to its credit, defines within the related party regulations that the transactions have to be done as a reasonably prudent buyer would do them. So specifically states such costs must not exceed the amount a prudent and cost-conscious buyer would pay for comparable services, facilities, or supplies that could be purchased elsewhere. So that is a great definition. And CMS actually gives examples and talks about purchasing using the power of being a large corporation, purchasing in volume. It goes into great detail about what this means. The problem is CMS did nothing beyond define this stuff and just left it to the industry to police themselves, because nobody knows what's behind those cost numbers that are reported in column 4 of worksheet A81 that we looked at before. That cost number can be any number that they choose to put there, because nobody looks at that number. Nobody looks behind that number. Nobody knows what the market value is for pharmaceutical products in Des Moines, Iowa. And so they can execute that contract at any value, and nobody is looking at that. To detour very briefly, I was deposing a CEO of a chain 2 weeks ago. And I was talking to him about reasonably prudent transactions within the related party context, and was asking him, before you executed the management agreement that gives you a 7% of gross revenue, 7% of gross revenue plus expenses, what did you do to determine that that was market rate? Nothing. What about with your therapy services? What did you do to compare and see if you were at market rate? I don't know. Did anybody do a market analysis? I don't think so. If that market analysis was done, would there be a report that exists somewhere? I doubt it. Basically what he was telling me was the contract, which was executed on one side by one owner. So for the facility, one owner signed it. And for the related party, another owner signed it. They just set the number at whatever they wanted. It wasn't reasonably prudent. Well, how do we know that? Because they made a 427% profit on their management company. No reasonably prudent buyer would agree to that. So this is a great definition. In practice, CMS is not monitoring any of this. Now, the reason this becomes important, and one of the reasons that Sam and I got so involved in this area, besides that we're total nerds, is that you can manipulate the income statement. And this is what they're doing. This is a facility, let's say, that owns their own building, okay? And they tell us on their cost report $16 million in total patient revenue, which is really billing. They had some uncollectibles. And so the actual amount of money that hit their bank account was $14.25 million. Then they had $13 million in expenses, which left them a profit of $1.25 million. This is a problem. It's a problem if your nursing home shows a profit on its income statement for two reasons. One, makes you a better target for litigation because plaintiff's attorneys go, oh, look, they're making money. You know, we're going to be able to collect a judgment. Secondly, is that they can't go crying to the legislators that they need more money if they're making tons of money. So they have to change this. This is how they do it. Go in and they manipulate the expense number using a related party. So remember, related party, nursing home number one, is now doing business with a real estate holding company. Before, nursing home number one owned the nursing home property. Now they spun it off to the real estate holding company and are leasing it back. Okay, so this is how it looks. That's our original. And now, when it was owned by the nursing home, they paid about $600,000 of their annual expenses was towards the mortgage payment and the taxes. But now they spun it off to the real estate holding company, and they're now going to pay $2 million in rent. Okay, what that does is it creates a $1.4 million siphon. That's the difference between the $2 million payment that they're making now and the $600,000 that they paid before. They've increased their expenses by $1.4 million, and that money's going to go to the real estate company. So what you've got is the original income statement. Now, the manipulated income statement, because they're now paying the real estate holding company $2 million. Well, that increased their expenses by that $1.4 million difference. And now, look, they're now losing $150,000. Now, a plaintiff's attorney who doesn't understand cost reports is going to look at this and go, oh man, I guess we, have to go look at their insurance and figure out if they have any. And if they do, we're going to be limited to that because this facility doesn't have any money. Bigger than that, though, is they now get to wave this income statement around and say, oh, let's all cry together. We need more money from the federal government. We need more money from Medicaid and the state governments because we're about to go bankrupt. We're going to close these facilities if we don't get more money. And for 30 years, our legislators have fallen for this tactic. There's no transparency into the financial dealings of these companies. There's hidden money and horrible outcomes. This is our structure, right? Related parties, all owned by the same parent. A CMS cost report, the 2540-10, is for a single facility. It's for nursing home number one. It files its cost report. It manipulates its income statement to make it look like it's losing money. Nursing home number two does exactly the same thing. The problem is we don't have any cost reporting for the real estate holding company. We don't have any cost reporting for the management company. We don't have any cost reporting for the parent company. We have no idea how profitable these companies actually are because the only thing that they're required to do is file a CMS cost report, which is facility, and it's highly manipulated. As Sam was talking about, we talk about related parties and do they actually affect staffing? Well, let's talk about what related parties do for the facility. First off, it protects their assets and shell corporations. You move all your hard assets, your big assets, your real estate, your building into related parties, which are then impossible to break into in litigation. So you've sheltered your largest assets and you move all of your money into related parties so that trying to get to any sizable amount of money or any asset is almost impossible. Then you siphon money so they don't show a profit. We already talked about that. And then we have to ask, why would a facility understaff anyway? I mean, besides financing, is there any reason you would understaff? Well, of course not. Only understaff if there was some profit motive involved. And so when we go back and say, okay, how does this affect staffing? Well, protecting assets and shell corporations limits the risk to the operators. You're now taking away the risk of losing sizable assets in litigation. So they no longer fear litigation. Litigation is now a cost of doing business because they've sheltered all their assets so that it's, pennies on the dollar in these settlements, because if you sue the facility and you get a $10 million judgment, it has no assets. So they're just going to collapse that entity, declare it bankrupt. My $10 million judgment becomes worthless. And then they reopen the facility under basically a very similar name the next day. Boom. Why should they staff properly? There's not a physical monetary reason for them to fear repercussions. Litigation's a cost of doing business, and CMS and state fines are a joke. If you even got fined for it, oversight is a whole nother problem. Secondly, siphoning money so they don't show profits. Yeah, this is a great excuse to cut staffing. This is exactly what the industry has done for 30 years. It's held up those manipulated financial statements and said, look, we have no money. We couldn't staff better if we wanted to. And boy, do we want to. But we just don't have the money. It's a lie. The money's hidden in related parties. And by hiding the money in related parties, they can now face legislators and the public and say they don't have money and say they can't staff better. But somehow these nursing home owners are becoming billionaires. You don't become billionaires by losing money on all your investments. And why understaffed to begin with? Because it increased its profits. It's the single largest cost, the single largest expense in a nursing home. So if you can cut your staffing cost, you will commensurately increase your profitability.
Thanks, Ernie. And I just want to say, Ernie has a way of explaining things these are really complex issues, but he has a way of explaining them like no one I've ever met. So in our report, where we feature him talking about a variety of issues, but we bring you right through the data available to do this type of analysis. We walk you through the cost report, show you where this information occurs. And we also do more on related parties. And there's other videos too with Ernie talking about how short staffing is so lucrative to nursing homes, how just small reductions in staffing can mean millions to nursing homes, chains over a period of time. So I want to talk a little bit. Ernie and we like to play with data. We need to get lives out of data, but we were talking about, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about private equity in healthcare and in nursing homes. Private equity are these investment companies that seek short-term profits. They can be publicly or privately traded, but the idea is they take money from investors, they go seek investments, and they try to suck as much money out of them as they possibly could in a short period of time. This is a lot of the attention brought to nursing home finances and nursing home quality of care tends to focus on private equity, unfortunately, when really, I mean, they do make up a sizable amount. 11% of nursing homes are owned by private equity, according to CMS. But the issues we're talking about today are common not just to private equity, they're common to nonprofit homes, and they're common to for-profit homes. So Ernie and I, we got talking because the issue with private equity is that there's demonstrable bad care. I mean, they're not even trying to pretend that they're in it for the health of residents. Over the past few years, there's been ample evidence showing how residents that reside in private equity-owned homes receive poorer care. One research showed that one study, showed that just residing in a nursing home owned by private equity increased mortality by 10% in Medicare residents. And in a recent proposed rule, CMS itself cites evidence of poor quality of care in private equity, and is taking some minimal action to at least identify these players. But it's important. I don't want you to take away from this presentation that this is a private equity problem. It's not. This private equity smelled blood in the water. This problem preceded private equity, and like sharks, they came in and they are doing and taking advantage of a system created both by the nursing home industry, but also by CMS to take these profits. So Ernie and I started talking about this Porta Piccolo group. Porta Piccolo is infamous, famous. If you Google Porta Piccolo nursing home, you'll get a litany of stories from a variety of publications, including the New Yorker, Washington Post, I think Barron's or Forbes did a story on them. They're primarily two folks that live, I believe, in Brooklyn. In 2015, when they created Porta Piccolo, this private equity investment group, they were 25 and 32 years old. They had no experience operating nursing homes, and they quickly weaseled their way into the world of nursing homes. And they've become kind of the poster child for private equity and care declines. I encourage you to read the New Yorker story. If you Google Porta Piccolo, you will see evidence of how bad the care is. And we're talking about literally the month after Porta Piccolo purchases a home, care can decline. But nevertheless, CMS allows them to purchase homes despite story after story of horrible care. So we were talking about it, and we were thinking about Tennessee for some reason. I said, let's go see if there's any Porta Piccolo homes in Tennessee. And when and again, there's one caveat with all of this. It's impossible to ascertain, sometimes it's possible to ascertain who owns a nursing home. Ernie will admit that the nursing home ownership is so opaque and so nebulous that it's almost impossible to find out who owns a nursing home. The report that we did, that Ernie and I did, focused on one chain, Breas, and someone's reached out to us and said, you didn't get all the Breas homes. And that's because the ownership is so hidden that CMS itself admits they don't know who owns some nursing homes. But we were able to identify at least 12 nursing homes in Tennessee. And these were all purchased in the past 4 or 5 years by the private equity investment group. So I said, let's pull the cost reports and look at what it's like, what related party transactions are like in these homes before and after. So again, here's worksheet A81. Again, we have this is what was reported in 2018 before Porta Piccolo was owned. And if you look here, there's one charge. It's a management fee. Again, this is very common. It's like a home office cost, and a related party charged this home $444,000 in related party costs. So this is the year before. And remember, all of this is money that's paid to a company owned by the same people who own the nursing home. I can't tell you that enough. This is a 2020 after being purchased by Porter Piccolo. Notice anything different? They don't even fit on the page. Instead of $444,000, we have $5.5 million in related party transactions. That's and they overpaid their related parties by almost $250,000. So let's look at this side by side. Before 2018, before Porter Piccolo, and after. That's an increase of a factor of 11. And this is one home. They charged a home that was previously charged $444,000 for management, now is charged $834,000. Well, the cost was $700,000, but they were paid $834,000. They must have done a real good job. And this is one home. This is one home in Tennessee. There's 12 others. So, and these numbers are similar for all of the other homes. So millions of dollars are being sucked out of Tennessee, out of not only for care of residents, but out of the hands of workers, out of communities. And CMS has no idea where it's going. CMS has no idea where this $834,000 went. There's no way to tell from this form what was received for this service. If you look down here, physical therapy, they report $552,000 in costs and make $593,000 in payments. But how are you able to ascertain if this cost is reasonable? There's nothing on this sheet. There's nothing on this form that provides CMS enough information to say this is reasonable. This is what you would have paid if you weren't paying a company that you actually own. And that's Ernie. This is like a before and after. That's what Ernie calls it. And if Ernie sits on this trove of data, and every once in a while he shows me something, I'm like, why haven't you shown me this before? But I also want to show you one other thing that's most important. This money isn't going towards care. This 11 factor increase in related party transactions didn't result in better care. In fact, if you look at the staffing for these homes for that period of time, before it was owned, it wasn't staffed at a great amount, about 3.51. It dropped almost a half an hour in staffing almost immediately. Residents stopped receiving about 20 minutes less of care. And this is not attributable to the pandemic. Strangely enough, if you look generally across the country, staffing went up in the pandemic. And that's in part due to so many residents dying and facilities having to finally staff their facilities because families weren't there. But this is a huge drop in care. So this money isn't a huge investment. It would be different if we saw this shooting up, right? And we saw these unbelievable health outcomes and staffing outcomes, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing money going out and we're seeing care drop. So let's go back, Ernie, and talk about some solutions and what we can do here.
Sure. By the way, I've kind of been looking at the chat and questions again. Love the comments. I get super fired up and passionate about this stuff. I can see in the comments that a lot of other people are too. And, you're asking, what can we do now that we have a better understanding of this? What can a regular resident do? Well, the answer is get hold of your legislators, get hold of your ombudsman, give them support, make your voice heard so that we can get legislative changes on this, okay? And Sam and I are working on a project to go basically evangelize around the country. I've already spoken in many states on this subject to ombudsman's programs and advocacy programs. I'm going next week to Colorado, and I'm going to Oklahoma in June. New Jersey has got introduced legislation that we're about to talk about. California passed it. I believe Pennsylvania is working on it. The idea is we have to get state legislation on this problem. because we cannot depend on CMS. We can see that CMS is completely ineffective in handling this problem. And for us, after 30 years, to be waiting for fix this problem, yeah, it would be great if they did. But my point to everyone I talk to these days is, in your state, you're responsible for your elderly. You need to take care of them, and you need to take care of this problem. So the big question is, poor care due to underfunding or under reimbursement, or is poor care due to underutilization of the funds that are already being paid? That's the big question. We keep pumping money into the nursing home sector. I read this week another $1 billion plus payment increase is coming in 18 months. Why are we throwing more money into this industry when we don't know how much money they actually profit? We just keep throwing money at the problem, and all we're doing is making billionaires. So the answer to that question, are we underfunded or underutilized, is we need consolidated financial reports from the parent company to the very bottom of the corporate structure. So in our picture that we've been talking about today, we want to know, what are the consolidated financial statements from Tosh, senior care, all the way through to the bottom of the facilities. Not just facility cost reports, basically a cost report for the entire company. That way we capture the transactions with the related parties, and the profitability becomes evident when you consolidate all of that into a single cost report at the parent company level. Also,
we also need them to look at the reports, right? Someone other than you to look at these cost reports.
Exactly. And auditing is easy. I've actually had a conversation with some fairly high CMS people about doing electronic auditing on these cost reports and how you would set that up. And it's not difficult. You could do base level auditing as they're being filed and kick the ones out that don't meet, a base level audit. And then if you did random sampling auditing after that, you would probably be much better on top of the problem. Right now, they're not on top of anything. The second thing we need is better disclosure of ownership. And what we would be looking for there is ownership disclosure all the way back to individuals. Okay, one thing that people sometimes don't realize is that if you commit fraud in the Medicare and Medicaid sector and you're found guilty of committing that fraud, you're banned from participating in Medicare or Medicaid for a decade. Well, you can get around that ban by going and investing in a private equity company that now goes back into the nursing home industry. So you can hide behind the PE shield in the PE, it's called a PE pool, and not be seen. And what we're saying is we want to see all the individual owners. If you're in that investment pool, your name gets put on the list. And that way we can see who actually owns these facilities. It's not difficult. It's not difficult. I mean, they're getting paid billions of dollars. It's not difficult to give us a little extra information. The next step after getting consolidated cost reports and ownership, because now you're going to be able to see all the profit that is being realized at the chain level. You're going to be able to see, is this a reimbursement problem or is this a utilization problem? Well, then you get a federal minimum staffing requirement, and right now, what do you hear every day from the industry? Oh, that's an unfunded mandate. That's their big thing, unfunded mandate. We will need additional federal and state money if you pass a federal minimum staffing because we don't have the money to pay it. Well, what they're doing is they're showing you those manipulated cost reports when they say that. We know they have the money. We know where it is. It's in the related parties. Okay? It's not an unfunded mandate. But the only way we can know that is if we get consolidated financial statements. And then we will know for sure if this is an unfunded mandate or is it underutilization. So we just need consolidated financial statements to make that determination. We need a legitimate minimum federal staffing guideline, which would be 4.1 hours or greater. And we would need CMS to actually look at the data they're collecting and do a reasonable audit that it's reported correctly.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, I mean, this information is not something that they would have to create. They know down to the penny where money is going and how it's being siphoned. And frankly, in our report, again, we make a variety of suggestions in our report. CMS, in its regulatory documents, say you have to make your books open to us. You have to show us your books and explain to us where you got these costs. But it's just clear they're not. So I want to thank Ernie for being here. We want to talk. I mean, people are right to be upset. We're looking here at billions of dollars. And remember, these are Medicare and Medicaid dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. They're not, private pay. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars that are just going unaccounted for. And we really encourage you to read the report, which gets into detail, but also offers concrete steps about what we can do. But Ernie, thanks for being with us today. I just want to talk about
Absolutely.
I want to, before, if we can get to some questions, we will. But I want to give you guys some opportunities here to do some advocacy yourself. Please go to our Dignity for All webpage. You can see this. You'll be able to see this webinar after we post the recording, but all the webinars, please go see and talk to, see residents and workers talk about what it's like to live and work in understaffed homes. Importantly, people have said, what can we do? We need your support. Go to this link on our website. It's on our Dignity for All website. We've created a template for you to email your Congress members and say, support staffing standards and transparency. It's a David versus Goliath battle right now. The industry has millions and millions of dollars that they're pumping into ads. They run ads on Hulu. It's a David versus Goliath battle, and they're going to their Congress members with these doctored cost reports and saying the sky is falling. They need to hear from families and residents and advocates that we support minimum staffing standards for residents, and they must increase transparency. So you can go to that link on our web we shared the slides, the link right there, and just put your name, your first name, and your address in, and it will automatically send it to your Congress members. We need to have your voices heard. This is coming, and this is an opportunity here that it's a generational opportunity to protect residents, and we really would like you to do that. And this is our connection information. I think we have 3 minutes. Lori, I didn't know if there was Lori Smetanka, our executive director, has been monitoring some questions. I imagine some of them are very similar. I don't know if you wanted to try to get to one or two before we wind up.
Yeah, I think there's, thanks so much to all of you for being so active in the questions in the chat. We're going to continue to be working on this issue and sharing more information. I think, one of the questions that people had is, how widespread is this? I mean, in the report, we looked at 3 different corporations. You talked about a 4th one today, but, how many companies use these related party transactions? And so how widespread is it?
Almost all of them. If it's a for-profit facility, which the vast majority are these days, they almost assuredly are using related party transactions, particularly in using management companies and real estate holding companies to lease the property back. Those are the top 2 that you see almost everywhere. The problem within the nonprofit sector is that some of the nonprofits do not show related party transactions, but it's because the companies they're doing business with are owned by the trustees of it's not owned by the charity, so it's technically not a related party. And so what they're doing is they're sucking all the money out of the nursing home to the trustees under the banner of being a nonprofit. And we can't see those related party transactions. So I'm very leery of nonprofits within this sector too. This sector, somebody in the comments I saw said, it sounds like the mob's involved. The fact is, I'm an ex-prosecutor. And when I first looked at a cost report, a friend of mine invited me to lunch, was like, nobody in our firm can read this cost report. Can you tell us what it says? And when I opened it up and started looking at it, the first thing that I thought was, this is a money laundering operation. This looks just like how a drug cartel moves its money. And so, yeah, it does look shady because it is shady. Is it illegal? No, it is perfectly legal. But they are doing it to hide their profitability.
Thanks, Ernie. It's the top of the hour. I just want to say that the official number is 70% of nursing homes use that. But as Ernie said, there's certain ways to disguise them. So that number is probably higher. Some, of course, are, as our illustration showed today, some use them more prolifically than others. Why we chose these three, it was just a random choice. I think similar numbers would show for other random three chains. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Please go to our website, consumervoice.org, and go to the our Dignity for All webpage. You can share there what staffing means to you. You can contact your Congress member and say, hey, this is intolerable, protect nursing home residents. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is stealing money from residents and workers, and we have to stand with them in order to protect our most vulnerable citizens. Stay tuned with us. We're going to be offering more events, and stay tuned for when the minimum staffing standard is announced. We will be here to support you in your efforts to comment about any proposed regulation. So thank you. And thanks again, Ernie. We appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on Pursuing Quality Long-Term Care. This podcast is a program of the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. Make sure to visit our website, theconsumervoice.org/pursuingquality, where you can subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and find more information and resources. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode.